Get out of my house. I screamed at Hannah, my daughter-in-law, as she stood in my living room directing strangers to rip down my walls. This is my home. Hannah turned to face me, her sweet mask finally slipping. Actually, Elizabeth, according to these legal papers, it's our home now. She waved documents in my face while men in hard hats continued measuring my precious Victorian walls. Tyler signed a power of attorney over to me for all property decisions. I couldn't breathe. The U-Haul truck outside, the demolition crew tramping through my house, my own daughter-in-law treating me like an intruder in the home I'd shared with Richard for 40 years. Tyler would never do that without telling me. Oh, but he did, Hannah said, that cold smile returning. He's so worried about your recent episodes, the forgetfulness, the safety issues. He asked me to handle the home improvements while he focuses on his new job. Episodes? Safety issues. What was she talking about? My house was perfectly safe. I'd just had it inspected 6 months ago. But Hannah spoke with such confidence, such authority, that I felt my own certainty crumbling. Where am I supposed to live during this destruction? I demanded, watching strangers mark my antique furniture for removal. I've prepared the basement for you, temporarily of course, until we finish the safety upgrades upstairs. She gestured toward my basement like she was doing me a favor. That's when the terrible truth hit me. The woman who called me mom just 6 months ago, who seemed so perfect for my son Tyler, was systematically destroying everything I built. This wasn't about home improvements. Hannah hadn't just married my son. She'd married into my life to steal it. But what I didn't know yet was that Hannah had been planning this moment since the day she first walked into my house, and her next move would be even more devastating. If you're wondering how someone could be this calculating, subscribe now because Hannah's manipulation was just getting started. Have you ever trusted someone who turned out to be your worst nightmare? Tell me in the comments. Let me back up to 6 months ago to show you how Hannah played the long game. My name is Elizabeth. After my husband Richard died from a sudden heart attack, I was drowning in grief. The house felt too quiet, too empty without his laughter echoing through the halls. Richard had been my everything for 40 years, my best friend, my partner, my anchor in every storm. When the paramedics couldn't revive him that cold February morning, I felt like my world had crumbled to dust. So I threw myself into renovating our Victorian home. Every tile I replaced, every fixture I updated, every coat of paint I applied was my way of healing from the devastation of losing my soulmate. I'd work from sunrise to sunset, my hands raw from scraping wallpaper, my back aching from laying new flooring. But the physical pain distracted me from the emotional agony that threatened to consume me every waking moment. This house held everything precious to me. I was pouring my heart and every penny of my savings into making it perfect, because I planned to give it to Tyler and Hannah as their wedding gift. I already contacted my lawyer about transferring the deed after their honeymoon. I thought I was being the generous mother-in-law, helping them start their marriage in a beautiful home without the burden of a mortgage. I imagined their future children playing in the same backyard where Tyler built sandcastles and climbed the old oak tree. I had no idea I was handing Hannah the keys to my own destruction. When Tyler first brought Hannah home, 8 months after Richard's funeral, she seemed absolutely perfect on paper. She had a law degree from a prestigious university, came from what appeared to be a wealthy family, and spoke eloquently about her career ambitions at a high-profile firm. She dressed impeccably, knew proper etiquette, and had this polished confidence that made her seem successful and worldly. She was everything I hoped for my son: educated, sophisticated, the kind of woman who could give Tyler the successful life I always dreamed he'd have, but never felt capable of providing for myself. Tyler seemed transformed around her. He stood taller, spoke more confidently, and wore better clothes. For the first time since his father's death, I saw genuine happiness in his eyes. Hannah would take his arm possessively, call him my brilliant husband-to-be, and talk about their future with such certainty that I felt relieved someone was finally taking care of my boy. But looking back now, there were signs I ignored completely. Hannah would walk through my house during their visits, not admiring the renovations like a normal guest would, but taking notes on her phone with this calculating expression I mistook for admiration. She'd photograph architectural details, measure room dimensions with a tape measure she conveniently carried in her purse, and ask to see areas most guests never requested: the basement, the attic, even the utility room. She asks detailed questions that seemed innocent at the time, but now feel sinister. "Elizabeth, what's the current property value in this neighborhood?" she inquired over dinner. Her voice sweet, but her eyes sharp. "Are there any major development plans for this area? Any zoning changes coming?" When I answered enthusiastically, proud of my research, she nodded thoughtfully and jotted something down in a leather notebook she always carried. I told myself she was just being thorough, planning their future as responsible adults should. She's probably thinking about schools for future grandchildren, I'd reason with myself. Or maybe she's considering the investment potential. I was so desperate to see the best in her because Tyler seemed genuinely happy for the first time in years. Hannah would spend hours measuring rooms, photographing architectural details from multiple angles, even asking to see my property tax documents to understand the ongoing costs. She claimed she wanted to help with maintenance planning, to be a good stepdaughter who could assist with household management. I was so touched by her apparent interest in our family home that I showed her everything: the original blueprints Richard and I had commissioned, the renovation permits I obtained, even Richard's insurance policies and the detailed appraisals I had done. I was so wrong about everything. The wedding was everything Hannah wanted: expensive, elegant, and exclusive. She insisted on the grand ballroom at the Ritz-Carlton, a designer dress that cost more than my car, and flowers, flown in from Ecuador. The guest list included people I'd never met, all claiming to be her family and friends from her prestigious social circle. When I saw the final bill, my heart nearly stopped. $53,000, my entire life savings, plus money I'd borrowed against the house. But I convinced myself it was worth it. This is an investment in their happiness, I told myself as I signed check after check. Richard would have wanted Tyler to have the perfect wedding. I imagined my late husband smiling down at us, proud that I was giving our son the celebration we never could have afforded when he was alive. During the reception, while Tyler danced with his radiant new bride, I felt this overwhelming sense of accomplishment. I'd done it. I'd given my son the fairy tale wedding he deserved. That's when I noticed Hannah step away from the dance floor, phone pressed to her ear, speaking in hushed tones near the flower arrangements. Curiosity got the better of me, and I moved closer, pretending to admire the orchids. That's when I heard words that should have terrified me. "Phase 2 starts the minute we get back from Bali," Hannah was saying into her phone. "The old woman won't see it coming. She's already broke from paying for this circus." My blood turned to ice. "Hannah, who were you talking to?" She spun around, that practiced smile immediately replacing the cold expression I'd glimpsed. "Oh, Elizabeth, just coordinating Tyler's surprise. You know how I love planning special moments for my husband." She laughed, but it sounded forced, artificial. "I'm arranging something wonderful for when we return from our honeymoon." I wanted to press further, but Tyler appeared, sweeping Hannah back onto the dance floor. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and champagne toasts, but that phone call haunted me. What was phase 2? What surprise was she planning? 3 days after they returned from their honeymoon in Bali, tanned and supposedly blissful, Hannah showed up at my house. But she wasn't alone, and she wasn't carrying vacation souvenirs. A massive U-Haul truck sat in my driveway, and Hannah emerged from a black SUV with 2 people I'd never seen before. "Elizabeth, I'd like you to meet my sister Samantha," Hannah announced, gesturing to a sharp-faced woman carrying a clipboard and measuring tape. "She's a licensed real estate appraiser, and this is our cousin Derek. He's in the house flipping business." My stomach dropped. Why was a real estate appraiser in my home? Why did they need someone who flipped houses? Before I could ask questions, they swept past me into my house like they owned it. Samantha immediately began photographing everything. The crown molding I painstakingly restored, the hardwood floors Richard and I had refinished ourselves, the custom kitchen cabinets I saved for months to afford. Derek was measuring walls and tapping on surfaces, muttering about structural possibilities and profit margins. "What's happening here?" I demanded, following them as they moved through my home like predators. Hannah pulled out a manila folder thick with documents. "Tyler signed over power of attorney for all property decisions to me," she said, her voice now completely devoid of the sweetness I'd grown accustomed to. "He's so busy with his new position at the firm, he asked me to handle everything related to the house." I stared at her in disbelief. "He never mentioned this to me." "He didn't want to worry you with the details," Hannah replied smoothly. "But we've decided to do some major renovations. Turn this place into something more modern, more valuable." They had blueprints. Actual blueprints of my house with red lines drawn through walls, X's marked over my favorite rooms, and notes about demo here and gut completely. They had contractor estimates, timelines, and a renovation budget that made my wedding debt look like pocket change. They were going to destroy everything Richard and I had built together. I called Tyler immediately. "Tyler, you need to come home right now. Hannah is destroying our house with strangers, and she says you gave her permission." When Tyler arrived an hour later, he didn't rush to my defense like I expected. Instead, he looked at me with this mixture of pity and concern that broke my heart. "Mom, we need to talk," he said gently, the way you'd speak to a confused child. Hannah had gotten to him first. Over the past weeks, she'd been building a case against me that I never saw coming. She convinced my own son that I was becoming a safety hazard, leaving gas burners on, forgetting to lock doors, creating dangerous situations that could hurt myself or others. "Look at this, Tyler," Hannah said, pulling out her phone with theatrical concern. She showed him photos of burnt pans supposedly left on my stove, security footage of me wandering around confused at night, even printed emails from neighbors supposedly calling about strange smells coming from my house. I stared at the evidence in disbelief. "Tyler, I never left any pans burning. I don't wander around confused at night. This is insane." But the proof was right there on Hannah's phone. Photos time-stamped from the past month, videos that clearly showed me in my nightgown, looking disoriented in my own kitchen at 2 a.m. Concerned messages from Mrs. Patterson next door about gas odors. The worst part? Most of it was staged, and I was too trusting to realize it. Hannah had been creating these incidents for weeks while I thought she was being a caring daughter-in-law. She'd turn on burners and burn pans while I was napping in the afternoon, then wake me up to discover them together. "Oh, Elizabeth, you left the stove on again," she said with fake concern. Thank goodness I smelled smoke. She unlocked doors and windows during my evening walks in the garden, then pointed out how forgetful I was becoming when we'd return to find them open. "You must have forgotten to lock up again," she sighed sympathetically. "It's okay, these things happen as we get older." She even had Samantha pose as my concerned neighbor, calling Tyler about supposed gas smells from my house. Tyler showed me the call logs, multiple reports over the past month from Mrs. Patterson, expressing worry about my safety. To Tyler, looking at Hannah's carefully constructed evidence, it appeared that his grieving mother was rapidly declining and becoming a danger to herself and the neighborhood. He'd been losing sleep, worried sick about me living alone in this big house. "I didn't want to hurt your feelings, Mom," Tyler said, his voice breaking. "But Hannah's been documenting these incidents because she's concerned about you. We both are." Hannah nodded solemnly. "I love you like my own mother, Elizabeth. That's why I couldn't ignore these warning signs." She even got Tyler to agree that I needed supervision for everyone's safety. In his mind, the renovations weren't about stealing my house, they were about making it safer for his declining mother, while ensuring someone responsible was there to watch over me. Within a week, contractors were ripping out my kitchen under the guise of safety upgrades. The gas stove that had supposedly been my downfall was the first to go. Hannah moved me to the basement temporarily to keep me away from hazardous areas while they renovated. Every morning, she'd bring me coffee in my basement exile and point out new safety concerns she'd discovered. "We found exposed wiring behind your bedroom wall, Elizabeth. It's a good thing we're fixing this before something terrible happens." I was trapped in my own home, watching my life disappear one lie at a time. One night, I couldn't sleep in that cold basement room Hannah had banished me to. The hammering had finally stopped after hours of demolition upstairs, but something else kept me awake. I could hear Hannah's voice drifting down through the old heating vents, talking on the phone in what used to be my living room. At first, I tried to ignore it, but something in her tone, cold, calculating, completely different from the sweet voice she used around Tyler, made me creep up the basement stairs to listen. What I heard through that door made my blood run cold and changed everything I thought I knew about my daughter-in-law's plan. She was talking to someone named Joseph, and they weren't discussing tile choices or paint colors. They were discussing me like I was a problem to be solved. "The old lady's more observant than we thought," Hannah was saying, her voice sharp with frustration. "She keeps asking questions about the contractors, wanting to see permits. But Derek found the building code violations we planted. If we can prove the house is a safety hazard with her as the owner, we can get Adult Protective Services involved and force her into supervised living." My heart pounded so hard, I was afraid she'd hear it. Building code violations they planted? What did that mean? Once APS declares her incompetent to manage her own living situation, Hannah continued, it's just Tyler managing the property, and Tyler signs whatever I put in front of him. He trusts me completely now. The person on the other end, Joseph, said something I couldn't hear, but Hannah laughed. It was a sound I'd never heard from her before, cruel and satisfying. "Tyler thinks I'm protecting his poor declining mother," she said. "He has no idea that by this time next month she'll be in a state facility and will own this house outright. The property value alone is worth $800,000, and that's before we flip it." I gripped the stair railing to keep from falling. This wasn't about home improvements. This wasn't even just about stealing my house. Hannah was planning to have me declared incompetent and institutionalized so she could take everything Richard and I had built. "Joseph, you should see the documentation I've created," Hannah continued proudly. Photos of her accidents, fake neighbor complaints, even medical concerns I've been planting with Tyler for months. Adult Protective Services will take one look at this evidence and declare her a danger to herself. That's when I understood the true scope of her plan. Hannah had done her research thoroughly. She knew that if I was declared a safety risk to myself or others, the state could force me into supervised care against my will. And if Tyler was my primary caretaker and married, his spouse would have equal say in all decisions about my living situation and property. But there was more. Hannah's voice became even more sinister as she outlined the final phase. "The beautiful part is Tyler will never suspect anything," she said. "He'll think he's being a loving son, protecting his mother from herself. By the time he realizes what's happening, we'll have legal control of everything. And if he ever gets suspicious later, well, who's going to believe him over medical documentation and APS reports?" I realized I'd been holding my breath. Hannah wasn't just stealing my house, she was stealing my freedom, my dignity, my entire life. And she was using my own son's love for me as the weapon to destroy me. If you think Hannah's plan was diabolical, wait until you hear what I discovered about her real identity. Make sure you're subscribed, because this story gets so much darker. Have you ever realized someone you trusted was planning something terrible behind your back? Tell me in the comments how you found out. I may have been grieving, but I wasn't stupid. The next morning, after hearing Hannah's terrifying phone call, I knew I was fighting for my life. I called my old friend Patricia Morrison, who happened to be a retired private investigator. Patricia and I had worked together at the hospital for 20 years before she moved into investigation work. If Hannah was playing games, I needed to know the rules. "Patricia, I need your help," I said when she answered. "I think my daughter-in-law is trying to steal my house and have me committed." Most people would have thought I was paranoid, but Patricia had seen enough family fraud cases to take me seriously. "Elizabeth, give me everything you know about this woman. Full name, background, where she claims to be from. I'll start digging immediately." What Patricia found in 3 days of investigation would have impressed even Hannah herself. She called me with results that made my blood run cold, but also gave me hope for the first time in weeks. "Elizabeth, sit down," Patricia said when she called back. "Hannah George isn't her real name. In fact, almost everything she's told you and Tyler is a complete fabrication." I was shocked when I listened to Patricia's discoveries. Hannah had done this before. Twice. She married into wealthy families, manufactured safety crises around elderly relatives, then manipulated her way into controlling inheritance once the older family members were removed from their homes. "Her real name is Jennifer Walsh," Patricia continued. "She's wanted for elder abuse and fraud in California and Arizona." The victims were both widowed women in their 70s who ended up in state facilities while Jennifer and her accomplices took control of their property. The law degree Hannah had bragged about was completely fake. The prestigious university she claimed to have attended had no record of her ever enrolling. The family money she'd flaunted during their courtship was stolen from her previous victims. Even her sister Samantha was part of the con. They weren't actually related at all. Samantha's real name was Kelly Bryant, and she had a criminal record for real estate fraud. "But Elizabeth," Patricia said, her voice getting excited, "here's where it gets interesting. Jennifer is sloppy. She uses the same methods every time. Fake safety violations, staged accidents, manipulation through adult children. She's been getting away with it because her victims end up institutionalized and can't fight back." Patricia found the other families Jennifer had destroyed. 2 elderly women who died in state care facilities after losing everything. Their children still believed Jennifer had been trying to help, still thought their mothers had become genuinely unsafe. The pattern was identical to what was happening to me. But here's what Hannah didn't know about me, and it was about to become her biggest mistake. I'd been recording everything. Every conversation, every phone call, every staged accident she'd created. Richard had been paranoid about home security after a break-in in our neighborhood years ago, and our house was wired with cameras and microphones in every room. "I have footage of her burning those pans while I was sleeping," I told Patricia. "Audio of her unlocking doors and windows. Even recordings of her coaching Samantha on what to say when she called Tyler, pretending to be our neighbor." Patricia was silent for a moment. Then she laughed. But it wasn't a happy sound. "Elizabeth, Hannah thought she was playing chess with an helpless old woman. She had no idea she was being watched and recorded every step of the way." But the best part was still coming. Richard's security system wasn't just recording Hannah's staged accidents. It had captured that phone call with Marcus, every word of her plan to have me declared incompetent and institutionalized. Hannah had played her hand perfectly, but she'd done it all in front of cameras she never knew existed. I decided to give Hannah exactly what she wanted: a confused, helpless old woman who seemed increasingly unsafe. If she wants to play games, I play them better than she ever imagined. I started acting more scattered around her, leaving cabinet doors open where she could discover them later. I pretended to forget conversations we'd just had, ask the same questions twice, and even leave the faucet running once or twice when I knew she was watching. "Oh my, did I do that again?" I'd say with fake confusion when Hannah would point out my supposed mistakes. "I don't remember turning that on." Hannah's eyes would light up with satisfaction every time I gave her new evidence of my declining mental state. She'd immediately photograph whatever I'd forgotten to do, adding it to her growing collection of proof that I was becoming dangerous. I let her think her plan was working perfectly. Meanwhile, Patricia was coordinating with Adult Protective Services to expose the fraud. She'd contacted the detective, who'd been tracking Jennifer Walsh's previous crimes, and shared our evidence. They were building a case that would not only save me, but put Hannah and her accomplices behind bars. Elizabeth, we need to let her get close to actually filing those commitment papers, Patricia explained during one of our secret phone calls. If we expose her too early, she might flee before we can arrest her. We need her to commit the fraud completely. I was preparing the biggest surprise of Hannah's career, but I had to be patient. Every day, I watched her move my furniture, tear down walls, and treat my home like her personal renovation project. Every day, I pretended to be more confused, more helpless, while secretly documenting her every move. The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday evening when Hannah brought home a manila envelope that made my stomach drop. Inside were commitment papers for Golden Years Assisted Living Facility. She'd convinced Tyler that I was becoming too dangerous to live alone, that one day I'd burn the house down or worse. The papers were already completely filled out with my information, ready for Tyler's signature as my next of kin. She'd even scheduled the safety inspection for the following week. Adult Protective Services would come to evaluate my living situation, and Hannah had made sure they'd find exactly what she wanted them to see: a declining woman in an unsafe home environment. That night, after Tyler had left for his evening shift at the hospital, Hannah came down to my basement room carrying a cup of tea and those papers. She sat on the edge of my makeshift bed with that practiced look of concern I'd grown to hate. "Elizabeth, I know this is hard, but it's for everyone's safety," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern that made my skin crawl. "Tyler's worried you'll hurt yourself. We both are. Look at this lovely place I found for you." She showed me glossy brochures of Golden Years Assisted Living. Clean white rooms, smiling nurses, activities like bingo and arts and crafts. It looked like a prison designed to look cheerful. "This place has round-the-clock supervision, and you'll never have to worry about leaving the stove on again," Hannah continued, her voice sickeningly sweet. "No more dangerous stairs to navigate, no more responsibilities to stress about. You can just relax and let trained professionals take care of everything." She handed me a pen, expecting me to sign my own commitment papers. "Tyler will sign the guardian paperwork tomorrow, and we can have you moved by the weekend. Isn't that wonderful?" I looked at those papers, at Hannah's fake sympathetic smile, and realized this was the moment I'd been waiting for. She'd finally shown her hand completely. It was time to show her mine. I took the tea and smiled sweetly, playing the confused old woman she expected me to be. "Hannah, can I ask you something?" I said, tilting my head with fake bewilderment. "Are you really Tyler's wife, or are you Jennifer Walsh from Sacramento?" The cup slipped from her hands and shattered on the concrete basement floor. Tea splashed everywhere, but Hannah didn't even notice. For the first time since I'd known her, the mask of perfect composure cracked completely. Her face went white and her confident smile vanished. "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, but her voice shook. "I think you're more confused than we thought, Elizabeth." I continued to smile, that helpless old lady smile she'd grown accustomed to. "Patricia sends her regards," I said casually. "She's the investigator who's been building your case file for the past week. Such an interesting woman, Patricia. Did you know Adult Protective Services has been looking for you for 3 years? Something about staging safety hazards to force elderly people from their homes?" Hannah's eyes darted toward the stairs, calculating escape routes. Her carefully constructed persona was crumbling before my eyes. "You're delusional," she said, but her voice had lost all its authority. "Who's going to believe anything you say?" I watched her scramble mentally, trying to figure out how much I knew and how much was just the ramblings of a confused old woman. "There were 2 other families, weren't there, Jennifer? Eleanor Morrison in Phoenix and Dorothy Chen in San Diego. both lovely women who ended up in state facilities while you took their homes. Hannah's mask finally slipped completely. The sweet, concerned daughter-in-law disappeared, replaced by someone cold and calculating who I'd never seen before. Her posture changed, her facial expression hardened, and when she spoke, her voice was pure venom. "You can't prove anything," she said, stepping closer with menace in her eyes. "And even if you could, who's going to believe a safety hazard like you? I have documentation of your declining mental state. Photos, witness statements, medical concerns. Tyler will sign those commitment papers tomorrow, and you'll disappear into golden years where no one will ever listen to your crazy stories." That's when I played my trump card. I pulled out my phone and showed her the app I'd been using to livestream everything to a private server. "Every conversation we've had is recorded, Hannah. Every staged accident, every lie, every moment of your little performance. Patricia has copies. Adult Protective Services has copies, and Tyler is about to get copies." Hannah stared at the phone screen in disbelief. "That's impossible. You don't know how to use technology like that." I laughed, and it felt good to finally drop my own act. "Funny thing about grief, Jennifer, it makes people underestimate you. Richard set up this security system years ago, and I've been live streaming to the cloud since the day you moved in, including that lovely phone call you had with Marcus last night about getting me institutionalized." The color drained from her face completely. "You're bluffing." I touched the screen and played back her voice from the night before. "The old lady's more observant than we thought, but Derek found the building code violations we planted." Hannah lunged for my phone, but I was ready. I'd already sent everything to Patricia, to the police, and to Tyler. Her desperate grab came too late. "Game over, Jennifer," I said. "Check and mate?" Hannah tried to run, but Patricia had been waiting upstairs with 2 federal agents and an APS investigator. As soon as Hannah's feet hit the top step, she found herself face to face with Detective Rodriguez from the Elder Abuse Task Force and Agent Martinez from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. "Jennifer Walsh, you're under arrest for elder abuse, fraud, endangerment, and conspiracy," Detective Rodriguez announced as Hannah's face went from shock to pure panic. They'd been tracking her for 3 years, waiting for her to make this exact mistake. Tyler came home from his hospital shift to find his wife being arrested in our living room. The look on his face when he realized what he'd almost done to me was worth every moment of fear Hannah had caused. He stood frozen in the doorway, still in his scrubs, watching the woman he'd married being handcuffed while reading her rights. "Mom, I'm so sorry," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I almost signed those papers. I almost sent you away." The house renovations stopped immediately. Hannah's family disappeared overnight, like cockroaches when the lights come on. Derek, it turned out, was her boyfriend, not her cousin. And Samantha was her partner in crime, not her sister. They'd been running this con for years, targeting widows through their children, creating fake safety crises to steal homes and destroy families. Patricia showed me the case files later. 7 families destroyed, 12 elderly victims institutionalized, millions of dollars in property stolen. All because these predators knew how to manipulate love into a weapon. But Hannah's arrest was just the beginning. The FBI discovered a whole network of similar criminals operating across the country. My case became the breakthrough that exposed an entire elder abuse ring. Hannah's phone records led them to Marcus, who turned out to be running similar cons in Florida and Texas. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my fully restored house, watching Tyler replant my garden with the same roses his father had proposed decades ago. He's single now, wiser, and we're rebuilding our relationship one honest conversation at a time. He quit his job to stay closer to home, and we're both seeing a therapist to work through the trauma of Hannah's manipulation. Hannah is serving 7 years in federal prison, and her story became a training case for adult protective services workers nationwide. Samantha got 5 years, Derek got 4, and Marcus is still fighting extradition from Mexico, where he fled when the arrests began. But the real victory? I kept my home, my dignity, and my family. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be a victim. Hannah thought she was dealing with a helpless old woman who'd be easy to manipulate and discard. She had no idea she was messing with Elizabeth Davidson, who'd been outsmarting people and fighting battles long before Hannah was born. The prosecutors told me that my recordings were the strongest evidence they'd ever seen in an elder abuse case. Every staged accident, every fake emergency, every manipulative conversation was captured in crystal clear audio and video. Hannah's own words convicted her. And that U-Haul truck she'd brought to steal my life? I donated it to a women's shelter. Some women need help escaping dangerous situations. Others need help fighting back. I chose to fight, and I won. If this story showed you how dangerous manipulation can be, subscribe now, because you need to hear about the warning signs I missed that could save your family. If you enjoyed this story, like, subscribe, and share with others so they can learn too. See you in our next video.